I don't actually even believe in the concept of failure. I believe you either learn something or you're successful. I mean, you learn in success too, but the truth is you learn more when things don't work out because it forces you to do the post-mortem and say, all right, where did it break down? What went wrong?
Yeah.
What can we try next? And so don't be scared that like, oh, this might not work.
I also think being able to separate successes and lessons from your personal self-worth is so important in any job. Your self-worth is not tied into everything that you touch succeeding. Your self-worth is tied into pivoting, being aware, looking at that lesson and being able to change your mind, right? Changing your mind is the most important tool that any successful leader has. You have to be able to take in information and change your mind, much like you did on a daily basis in the startup culture of, we're gonna take in this information and we're gonna change our mind. Hey guys, what's up? It's Ann with Only Founders today. Thanks for joining us. I'm so excited to have our guest on. Thank you, Paige. I want to introduce everyone to Paige Arnof-Fenn. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ann. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. I can't wait for this conversation. And here's why. I need you guys to listen up because this woman is, wow. Okay, I'm just going to get into it because as I was prepping and I'm just like, we as women have to stop disappearing, A, and B, we have to be so loud and proud about our accomplishments. It's not even funny. So that's why you're going to want to listen to this episode because Paige is the founder and CEO of global branding and digital marketing firm Mavens and Moguls, which how cool is that name in itself? Her clients include Microsoft, Virgin, venture-backed startups, as well as nonprofit organizations. She graduated from Stanford University and Harvard Business School. She serves on several boards and is a popular speaker and columnist who has written for Entrepreneur and Forbes. Okay, Paige. Insane background. I want to talk about that today. First off, kudos to you. Like if everyone could just take a break and we just go, wow, that's insane. And we're talking to marketing guru here, genius in marketing, all of the things. We're going to talk about mistakes, failures, oopsies, oh shits. And then we're also going to talk about how marketing blends maybe with some brand work and some brand history that I have. But I just can't wait also to see Paige as a woman, as a founder, as a speaker, all of the things. Paige, when you hear that bio read, how do you feel?
I feel like I've got all the kind of scars and war wounds to prove it. You know, I was kind of a nerdy kid and I loved going to the schools I went to. I loved the jobs that I had early on. But, you know, I paid my dues in the trenches, worked my butt off, and it's been a wild ride, and I've loved every minute of it.
Which was your favorite of the schools you attended?
That's really hard. I think I did it at exactly the right kind of place. I loved being at Stanford for 4 years and Harvard for 2 years. I wouldn't have wanted to flip that. I had only been to California once for vacation before I went to Stanford, and I just fell in love with it. I mean, it was literally like being in a movie set or something. I just, you know, I grew up in the deep South, Tennessee, Louisiana, so it was hot and humid and muggy, and, you know, there weren't beaches or, you know, palm trees or anything like that. So when I saw California, it's like my eyes opened up and popped out. I just thought it was beautiful, and I made lifelong friends and just took some amazing classes. So I can't complain.
That's amazing. So what else did you want when you went to Stanford? Like when you went to California, were you seeking more than just an education?
I thought once I got there, I would never leave. I expected to live there for the rest of my life. But after
Wait, did you move for a boy? Did you move for a boy?
No, I moved for college. And when college ended, I had no intention of leaving California. I thought I would find work there and live there for the rest of my life. But I found a really good job that happened to be in New York City. And I really didn't want to move to New York City. I had been to New York and it was a fun place to visit, but I really didn't have a lot of interest in living there. I mean, compared to the Deep South and compared to California, you don't have a lot of wide open spaces. It's very expensive. It's very busy. Everybody's in such a rush. And I was not looking for that life experience, but it just so happened my senior year in college, Michael Douglas won the Oscar for the first Wall Street movie. And I saw the movie and I just got hooked. I was enamored with everything that I saw on screen. And I thought that is what I should be doing. And I interviewed and got a really good offer for a lot of money at the time. Those, Wall Street jobs were the highest paying jobs in the
What year are we talking about? What's the time frame?
87.
Oh, and, yeah. And as a female on Wall Street.
Exactly. No, it was a big opportunity and a big deal. And I was so excited. And I think I realized a week or two, and so as a 2-year commitment to go work on Wall Street, the level of job I was looking at. And I think by the end of the second week, I had realized pretty quickly, what makes a great movie doesn't necessarily make a great career path.
That only took 2 weeks. Bravo.
But, the lifestyle was really tough. We worked so hard, 80 plus hours a week, and it was just so intense. But I made a commitment and I was going to live up to my word. But I knew this was not going to be my career path. And I found out that they were going to need people in the New York office to go to the West Coast my second year of the commitment. And I immediately raised my hand and said, I will go anywhere on the West Coast you need me. Northern California, Southern California, please send me there. And they did. They sent me to Los Angeles for my second year. And although I loved living in LA, and at that point I was dating a boy on the West Coast.
Okay, so there it is.
That was perfect timing. And I did my second year out there. I didn't like the work any better, but I liked the place a lot better. But like I said, I knew this was not going to be a long time job for me. So I applied to business school, and then I got in back on the East Coast. So I packed up and spent the next 2 years in the Boston area. And the guy that I happened to be dating was moving to the East Coast on the exact same timing. He was moving to Washington, D.C., and we both moved and we got engaged after graduation. So we dated while I was in grad school. Then we got engaged and got married. So I really can't complain. It was great experience. But it was, I think especially in your early mid-20s, it's important to know what you're good at, what you like doing, but also what you don't like doing.
Yes.
And so that you can make career decisions in the context of building a life that you want to live. And as I said, the Wall Street jobs paid extremely well. But I realized taking a job for money was not going to be my path. I'm really glad that I did it when I did it, how I did it. And some of the friends I made on Wall Street are still lifelong friends.
That's
but
incredible.
I just knew, looking at my boss and my boss's boss and my boss's boss's boss, I didn't want any of their careers. I didn't want any of the life choices and trade-offs that they had made to make the money that they made. So
you saw the cycle and you said, no, this isn't for me. I was curious, what did you study when you were at Stanford?
I was an economics major, but I studied a lot of things. So when I was there in the 80s, the econ degree was not a super intense commitment. Like if you're pre-med or if you're an engineer, you don't get very many elective classes. That was a very heavy workload. With econ, I studied in Italy my junior year in college. And
What part?
Had Florence.
Florence is, I was wondering if you were going to say Florence. That's one of my favorite cities of all time.
My God, it was magic. That was one of the best things I've done in my entire life. And
Yep.
I had been an exchange student in France in high school. And then I went to Italy my junior year in college, and those trips changed my life. I mean,
Absolutely.
life altering. And
I
those
think
are
anywhere between the age of 15 and 25, if you can find a reason to travel abroad for an extended period of time and even study while you're abroad, because I believe traveling is studying, but when you leave, it is phenomenal how much life experience and relationships and challenges it will bring to you. So I'm really glad that you said that.
100%. And I have 3 nieces and a nephew on my side, and my husband has 2 nephews on his side. And all 4 of my family and one of his 2 nephews all did a year abroad in high school, every single one of them. And
Yep.
I agree, it just changes you in the very best way. And to learn
Hmm.
another language and another culture, it's just
Absolutely.
so important to see the world through other people's eyes, and to just learn their customs and traditions and habits, and even to read a newspaper or listen to the news in another country. You just realize your way of life and your way of doing things and the assumptions you make are not the way everyone else approaches life. What they eat, how they wind down, what they do for vacation or fun, and
Hmm.
just their normal habits.
There's 2 things when you travel abroad that are a bit altering. One is getting transportation done, any type of transportation. Transit systems, when you can read a map, when you can understand the direction of where you're trying to go with the end city on your ticket, which is always interesting, but then you have to learn it in their language, of course. And then you have to navigate their transit systems and mess up, right? And then figure out how to backtrack, because that's going to happen. And then the other thing, what you said, is media. So every country's media, newspapers, the morning news. So when I would travel abroad, I would literally just keep the local TV on if I had one in my hostel or my room, and I
Yeah.
would just have it on the morning news. I couldn't understand a lot of it. Of course, you could put subtitles on, but I was trying to just digest how they even did news, right? Because then every country is different. Like, I'm going to be honest, there are some countries where the news anchors are a bit more sex forward and they're sexy and they're trying to
Yeah.
be more appealing to you. And it's like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing with our morning coffee. And there are others that they are hilarious. And I don't know if you can understand the language or not, but you can understand the joy and you can feel the energy and the presence that they're trying to start your day with, which is really powerful.
Yeah.
You don't have to speak the same language to get the energy transfer that's communicated all throughout the world. And I think that was really beautiful. And then the last thing, actually, there's 3 then that I'll say. Rest. You said how they kind of rest or holiday or vacation. But rest, when we were in Spain, literally the siestas, the afternoons of just, it does stick with you. And now I haven't lived a life here until recently that I can really fully enjoy that. But because you have to hustle, you have to work your early career. But now that I'm a business owner and a mom, school gets out at 3. And so it's very much, we try not to overactivity ourselves. We try to keep that 3 to 6 p.m. a little more sacred. We don't do a ton of play dates during the week. Like, weekdays are pretty much like, let's wind down. We're all tired. Let's eat some really good food. This is a goal of mine, right? And so there are days that this doesn't happen. But there are days where you have seen other cultures. I mean, their stores are literally not open. So you can't do life from like 3 to 5 or 2 to 4, whatever it is. And that was really remarkable for me to learn young, because I think it sticks with you that rest is just as important in your day as hustle. And the more you rest, especially when your body's calling for it, the better your hustle is going to be.
And I think also, we live in a culture that's pretty intense. Like, Americans tend to work hard and play hard. And I feel like living in France or Italy or Spain, you see they don't live for their work the way that Americans do. And they take their vacation. And like you said, whether it's a siesta in the afternoon, when I worked on Wall Street, I was regularly at work at 10, 11, midnight. It was
Yeah.
burning the candle at both ends, getting home really late, leaving super early. People didn't do that in Western Europe when I was there. They have a much more balanced view of things. They don't eat lunch at their desk of something that they bought on the street and shoved down between two meetings. They sit down, they have a proper meal. And they'll go out and get a coffee. They're not
And they
drinking.
have conversation and community
Exactly.
with their food. Like food equals community.
Exactly. And I think you would probably agree with this too. Being in branding and marketing, it's really interesting to see how different cultures, like you said, some of them are much more flirty and sexy, and some of them are much more subdued or serious. But you can't assume that everybody does things the way you do things. And
Right.
to learn that, as you said, as a teenager or a young adult, it just makes you challenge things and think of things differently. You just don't assume that everything works the way it did when you were growing up. And I think those are
Right.
incredibly valuable lessons to learn early in life.
100% agree. Thank you. That was great perspective. I want to move into the start of you working for yourself. So we talked about Wall Street. You did Wall Street, then you did Wall Street in LA, which is like, okay, cool. And then so where did you go from there? Like were you burnt out, or was it just a happy accident? How did you start your own thing?
So after Wall Street, after business school, I went to corporate America. That's when I made the switch from finance into marketing. And my
Okay.
first marketing job was at Procter and Gamble. And P&G.
How did you get that though? Because I'm like fangirl here. I remember in my 20s, I wanted a job like that, and I had a marketing degree and I never got it. How did you get that job?
So P&G is like the most recognized marketing company in the world.
Yes.
They invented the concept of brand management.
Yeah.
And so running a brand like a business, you have a P&L, like you're running it to make money. And they are the mecca of marketing. I mean,
Yep.
every category they compete in, their product is number one, and sometimes it's number one and number two. They do everything excellent. And so I learned marketing from like the source of marketing. You learn about packaging and pricing and promotion and customers and research and media, and they just drill it into you. It is absolute marketing boot camp. And so I was a summer intern there between first and second year at grad school. And then I went back for 3 more years after I graduated.
Okay.
And I learned it's like drinking from a fountain. They know the way to make it work, and they teach you their way. It's funny now thinking that, when I was there, if you would talk to any of my bosses, they would tell you she's super smart, she works hard, but boy, is she a pain in the butt. Because every time they'd give me a new project, they'd say, okay, here's what I'm asking you to do. And they'd tell you, and this is the way Procter and Gamble does it. And it's a bulletproof system. You just need to learn the system. And they'd explain it to me, and I'd be like, well, that's a great idea, but I have some other ideas too. And they're like, no, Paige, we're not asking you to recreate the wheel. We know how to become the big kahuna. All of our brands are 800-pound gorillas. Like, just do what we're telling you to do, and you're going to do great. And so then I'd come back to my boss and say, okay, I know how to do it your way, but, and they're like, no. So it's funny because I now realize I was always trying to bend, break, and change the rules when I worked in corporate America. And so even though being an entrepreneur was not really a thing back then, people didn't talk about it the way that, there was no Shark Tank, like people didn't really do that so much. It was much more common to go work for an existing business. But now I think, wow, it's amazing I was as successful as I was in corporate America, because I was clearly pretty frustrated. And P&G is, old school, Fortune 500, hierarchy. And even among big companies, they were special in the fact that the only way to get promoted, they only do promote from within. So they don't hire people from the outside and bring them in as a vice president or middle management. You have to start at the bottom and work your way up. So your boss has to get promoted before there's a spot for you to get promoted. And so you have to wait your turn. You have to do every job from the bottom rung of the ladder to work your way to the top. And that was very frustrating for me.
I could see that.
You know, I ended up leaving that job because I just felt like I learned what I needed to learn. And there was another job I had heard about and I applied for and I got it. It was actually for the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta. And they needed somebody to run a joint venture. And they were looking for someone with a finance and marketing background. So I thought, oh my God, I have got that job down. Like
that was made for you, Paige.
It was. And I was a huge sports fan. And I was a big sports kid. I played, anything with a ball, a bat, a racket. Like I was the kid that went to sports camp for 2 months every summer from age 9 to 16. I played on 3 varsity sports in high school. I did.
So they knew with you they were going to get a fangirl and an employee, and that's what you want with your brand. That's a beautiful relationship.
And so that was amazing. And then when that ended, Coca-Cola is a big Olympic sponsor. So I got to know the folks at Coke I was there for about 3.5 years working on the Olympics. And then the folks at Coke made me an offer that was incredible. So I went to Coca-Cola in marketing and did a lot of sports strategy there, and it was incredible. Coke is probably the most recognized brand in the world. And so when you hand someone your business card and they see the Coca-Cola logo or the Procter & Gamble logo, you're an important person. Those are big brands. They're sold all over the world, and so they roll out the red carpet. So my job at Coke was awesome. Huge brands, huge budgets. You're talking multi-million-dollar businesses, but at the same time, those machines are well-oiled. Like they have a system. And they want you to follow.
Because I'm detecting a little bit of undertone when you say that. Let's dive into that.
Like market research. We know the value of market research. But when you're working with a brand that's been around for, the P&G brands I worked on were like, decades old. Coca-Cola was already over 100 years old when I started there. So they know who their customer is. And they want to get very granular into the details of the mindset of who are these people that, use my brand every day, who are the ones that recommend it, who are the ones that maybe try it but don't become loyal. So when they do market research, they are talking to, these are mass marketed brands. They're sold to moms and children and teenagers. And so
their target audience is really agnostic, right? You say, who's your target audience? Are you a human? Are you old enough to drink sugar? Because that's you. So,
and it's everywhere around the world, 365 days a year. And they have big budgets, so they can afford to sponsor the Olympics and the Grammys and the Oscars and World Cup soccer and everything. And when you do research for big brands like that, you talk to thousands of people and you survey them and you do focus groups, and it can take months. 6 months, 9 months. You send out a survey. You can't just do 1 or 2 focus groups. You need to do multiple groups in every geography at every age group to make sure that you've got the right message going to the right audience. And, you learn a lot. there's a definite process to do it, and they teach you the right way to do it, but it's slow and it's boring, and it's just like, all right, I think I know what we're doing here. Can we get started? Nope, we still need to talk to, more people in the Midwest, or we haven't talked to enough teenagers in California yet. So
but who sets the standard for that? It's almost like, wait, like who holds the pulse on when you say ready?
So, you got to remember, this is the early 90s. It's before the internet took off.
Yeah.
And P&G, not only do they have an amazing marketing department, they have a market research department. They have procurement people. They have strategy people. So everybody needs to get on board. And so you get one group behind it, and then they go, okay, well, let's see what this other group says. And let's, what if the packaging people say, in Europe, they really like this kind of packaging. Maybe we should test and see if that packaging works as well in the US. Or, these messages are really resonating in Asia. Why don't we see if, that's something that we should start talking about? So it's just like you pull the thread and it just keeps going and going and going. It's like, there's always more you can learn. There's always more you can do.
You think with Procter & Gamble and Coke, actually, both of those monstrous brands, did they communicate well by, I'm going to say department, but that's not it, by global region of the world, and then departmentalize within there, like what you were saying? Was there a seamless internal, executive leadership communication of all of those things so that the brand could still somewhat be centrally managed and have a central voice?
Right. So we had lots of different opportunities to convene with our counterparts in other parts of the world. You could circulate memos. We would have departmental meetings where we would share our learnings, or, hear about some test that was run. And then we want to learn from those people. But again, this was before Zoom and Skype. Right. And so
there's no tech. What are you doing, Paige? Did you even email? What was there back then?
It was before email. Email started.
But you sent a fax. That's it. You sent a fax.
But,
oh my gosh.
It was just, when I started at P&G, on your media budget, there was radio, television, print, and outdoor. That was it. And you either sold your products at Walmart, Kmart, Target, or convenience stores, or drugstores. Those were the options. You didn't have, cable, 500 stations. There was no internet online. Much more streamlined. But so I left Coca-Cola in 1997. And at that point, Internet 1.0 was just kind of starting to kick off.
I was thinking, so we're getting into the digital age slowly.
Exactly. Digital 1.0.
Yes.
And, I was reading all these trade magazines and, watching all these trends. And I was sitting in my big corporate cushy job at Coke with my private office with a door and my secretary, and I'm reading about all these companies that are raising tens of millions of dollars, companies I had never heard of before. And they were doing all these really cool, scrappy things. And, here I am in my early 30s thinking, I've never taken any career risk at all in my life. I went to the best schools. I worked at the best companies with big brand names. I have never.
I mean, your resume by your early 30s is it's already mind blowing for most of us. And you're only in your early 30s.
Right.
So this is good. This is getting juicy. Okay. So here we are.
Then I feel like if I'm ever going to get off the conveyor belt. If I don't do it now, the stakes are only going to get higher. And I really honestly felt like I was going to miss out. Like I would look back and regret if I didn't try it. Like, I was pretty confident that if I stayed at these big corporate entities, I was well trained. I knew they had drilled it into me. I knew what I needed to do to be successful, and I was always a good student, so I could deliver. But what about these companies that came out of nowhere, that no one knew that they existed, no one knew their name, and then they were going public and they were being sold, and people were making tons of money and having a ball, and these people were just renegades. And I thought, all right, I really should give this a try.
Well, and you kept your finger on the pulse outside of your amazing resume and the huge brands. And that I think is really important, because that was the calling that said, hey, you're seeing this in the start of the digital age 1.0. I mean, this is before Y2K. Like this is really early adopter. So this is great. Okay.
But I think that's what makes people like you and me very effective as branding and marketing people, because you're aware of the trends, you're reading all the new media. There were magazines. It wasn't just Vogue and Time. There were like Fast Company and like all these tech publications and on.
I have to say something here that just rang in my head with what you just said, and I have to say this. So you and me being marketing and brand executives and running our own thing, what you just said is huge for me. Marketing and branding are human-centered services. They are social jobs. They are economic jobs. They are business jobs, but they're mostly people oriented. So we talk about buyer behavior, consumer packaging, what looks attractive on the outside, how we give a brand, a business, a human characteristic, and then we go communicate that and sell it to another human. And I think what you're saying is so true. The best marketing and branding executives and business leaders are going to have their eye on the pulse of social, economic, global trends of how people are buying, how people are feeling, how people are engaging with each other, because how we market and brand things is to the human, which is
100%.
I love what you just said. Yes.
And it's interesting, when I used to recruit people for marketing and branding jobs before I started my own company, they expect all the traditional resume questions. But I'd always say, which book on the New York Times bestseller list, or which one of the top 10 box office hits that are of movies that have been released in the last month, or on the Billboard 100, what are like the 5 songs that you really think are the trends that are catching on the best? And if people look at me crazy, like, don't you want to hear about my grade point average, or don't you want to hear what
give a shit
marketing classes I took? And it's like, no, I want to know that your head is up, your antenna is up, that you walk the streets and look into the shops and you know what people are buying. And even if you don't watch Game of Thrones and it's like a huge hit, do you understand why people are attracted to it? Like, why are these movies, these books, these TV shows, what is it about that is really important and relevant to the world today? And you have to be able to connect those dots to be great at marketing. Like you said, it's the human interest, it's what motivates them to buy and recommend, and that's the name of the game in marketing. And so I basically left this very comfortable job and went and joined a startup that no one had ever heard of before. And I think my boss and my mother thought I was having a nervous breakdown. They're like, you just need a vacation. Don't quit this job.
Are you having a stroke?
Temporary insanity. And I'm like, no, I have to try this because it just is too tempting. It's too exciting. And I just feel like I'm going to look back and regret it if I don't give it a try. Okay. So I quit my job at Coca-Cola in Atlanta on a Friday, and I jumped on an airplane and I started at a startup in Los Angeles and Santa Monica Monday morning.
This
And
is you, like 20s and 30s, coast to coast, like
yeah,
just hopping the coast. All right.
exactly. And, in my corporate job, people dressed very buttoned up, suits, and, very proper.
Oh
And
yeah.
then I show up 5 blocks from the ocean in Santa Monica, and I'm wearing jeans and a, cute top, and I'm one of the most overdressed people in the office. The two guys that founded the startup are younger than me. I was kind of building a marketing department from the ground floor, and most
Okay.
of the people that were, in the company, they had, you know, body tattoos, piercings. They were wearing flip-flops or shorts. Their hair was dyed. They had their pet with them at work. I had never seen this in my career.
How
And
did you feel? How was your nervous system on that Monday? Like, walk us through those
I mean,
emotions.
I felt very old school, like, how like teenagers look at their parents, like, I was like one of the old, like I said, I'm in my early 30s.
But
And
you were grandma.
no, but compared to almost everyone in the company, they didn't know what to do with me in a way. Like I talked about having a job on Wall Street in the 80s, and they're like, oh, yeah, no, I was in fourth grade or something. Like, you know, it was just a bit of an out of body experience because I had a very senior job at Coke. So I was one of the youngest people at the level that I was
Sure.
at in a corporate job, but I was one of the 2 or 3 oldest people at the internet startup. So it was just a little surreal.
It's
But
almost like in the work world, like I always talk about parenting, but I feel like you went from being raised to then raising, and now you are the elder, and you threw yourself into parenting, but you skipped all of the middle, and so you're just like, okay, I'm the youngest of the family of 10, and I'm being raised, and then all of a sudden I'm gonna go. Now I'm going to be the grandma, and now I'm like the elder and the wise old soul of this group, and I have to lead everybody. And I feel like in a weekend that pivot is pretty phenomenal.
it was crazy. And then I had to hire all these people to do all the parts of marketing that we needed to do.
Yeah.
And I hired some great people. They were so not like me, not classically trained, not.
But that's a tip. I want to pause there for the audience. That's a tip. When you are growing and building your business, whether you own it or work in it, hire people that are not like you. Okay, continue.
So, and they were young, even though I was still relatively young. Most of the people I hired were kind of mid to late 20s, maybe early 30s. And, they had very different life experience and career experience than me. They did not go to the type of schools I went to. They had not had training at the type of companies I worked for, but they were really good at their part of the marketing mix. So we had raised, call it tens of millions of dollars, but we did not have multi-million-dollar marketing budgets. It was a tech company. And
marketing was last.
Exactly. And marketing is not what, it's not what the company does. It was kind of an ancillary function. It was not the center of the wheel the way it was at P&G and Coke. Those are marketing driven businesses. We needed to do market research. And I just told you, market research in these big companies, it's very cumbersome. It's statistically significant. You're talking to more than, more people that, like, it's almost like a presidential election. You want to talk
Right. You're campaigning for the brand.
And, this is a very different challenge. And
Yeah.
the first startup I worked for was targeting mostly young males, and they looked a lot like the guys that worked for me. They had body art and piercings and, traveled on skateboards and were running on the beach with their pets. And, so that was kind of our target audience. And the first startup was in the music and entertainment space, so very pop culture. And the way we did market research is my team would meet in the conference room. Everyone would show up with their coffee first thing in the morning. We'd pile into the conference room, and we'd cover the whiteboard with all the things we wanted to ask our customers. Like, what do we need to know today? to be better informed tomorrow. And we put together kind of a, 10 questionnaire, make sure everybody in the group had a clipboard, and they were armed with like a bunch of CDs and DVDs and t-shirts and baseball caps, swag with our company logo. And we'd go down to the beach, 5 blocks from our...
That's where my head went, was just cruise the beach.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of our target audience there. And we'd show up around lunch hour, call it 12 to 2. And we'd station ourselves at different parts of the Strand where people are walking and biking and hanging out. And we'd walk up to anybody that looked like they were in our sweet spot. And we'd say, do you have 5 minutes? We have a couple of questions for you. And we'll give you some CDs or some swag. And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And so we'd do that for 2 hours. And I had, call it a dozen people at various stations along the beach. Okay. And then at the end, we'd come back to the conference room. We'd tally up our votes. And before we left that afternoon, that evening, we would put things on the website, banner ads or things you could click on, based on the feedback we got earlier that day.
Within a day. You're talking a day turnaround time for that feedback to go live.
We'd all go home at night. We'd come back in the morning, get back into the conference room, and then we'd look at the results. That's the amazing thing about online marketing. You can read the data, like what did they click on?
Yep.
What did they...
That's so fast. You're talking collection, publication, and then review and pivoting your strategy within 24 hours.
Yes. And if the things that we thought we would, like based on the feedback, we expected, A, B, and C to get the most traction. But in fact, A did well, but B and C didn't do well at all. So now, tonight before we go home, we're going to put 2 more things up there. So we're constantly iterating.
Wow.
And the great thing about that is it's cheap, it's quick. And the truth is, if you tried to do traditional research, you don't have 6 or 9 months in an internet company. Your business would have moved in a completely different direction. You would have been left behind and lost.
Is that how your brain works, though? Did you love that fast-paced go, go, go? It seems like it. So it sounds like you kind of found your sweet spot when you went to the startup world.
Yeah, and all the time in corporate jobs when I was like, do we really need to talk to another 500 people? Don't we pretty much have what we need here? And they're like, no, we've only talked to, 20%.
40,000. No.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, come on, let's make a decision. Let's move forward. So it definitely appealed to me. And I felt like it was the right thing to do at the right time. Like the market had moved. And especially when you're dealing with pop culture and trends, you can't wait. You have to strike while the iron's hot. So, the first company that I ran marketing for, we went public in 1999, and then we were sold to Yahoo. So that was great. And then I did another startup as the head of marketing. And that company, about 1.5 years later, got sold to a private company, which was even better than going public, because when you go public and you're one of the top people, you're not allowed to sell your stock for like 6 months. And if you remember in Internet 1.0, a lot of those stocks shot up right away, but then they kind of crashed.
Fizzled. Yep.
So that wasn't as lucrative. But when you get bought by a private company, they write you a check that you can deposit that day. And that's a really good way to exit a business. And then
that's a great exit.
Then I did another startup as the head of marketing, and we also went public and were sold. So all 3 of those startups were survivors. They all, had really good exits. And I realized, when you work for a big brand that's been around for dozens of years or 100 years, that brand was successful before you ever showed up.
Correct.
You don't know.
And that brand was once a startup. I think that's what all of us can't fathom, is that all of these massive mogul companies were once a startup too, which is kind of an interesting thought.
Absolutely. But, it's hard to separate your contribution in that chain of events and activities that made that brand successful long term. When you go
Right.
work for a startup that no one's ever heard of, and then people say, like, well, now everybody knows Starbucks. Like, everybody, now these companies have been around and they're much better known and they're .com survivors. Then like, you've tested your mettle. You know what you're made of, because that company was not on anyone's radar when you showed up. And so there's a sense of pride and a sense of, like, I learned a lot working at those big companies that I didn't even recognize or appreciate at the time. And it was funny because when I was hiring all these people without all that kind of big experience, big corporate experience, and I was, getting everybody set up to help, I would explain to them, this is how, this is the way we're going to do market research. This is the way we're going to do our packaging or our promotions or our pricing. All my team would be like, how do you know this? Like, why are and I'm like, because
Did you see my resume?
I
Excuse me.
spent years doing this, so I know what I'm talking about. I don't know if it's going to work, and we're going to throw a bunch of stuff against the wall. Some of it's going to stick, but not everything. But that's okay, because I've got a lot of tools in my toolkit, and we'll just keep doing it until we get it right. And
What a valuable head of marketing you were for those companies. I mean, I don't even know on the flip side if they realize how lucky they were to have you in the early stages, because your talent, I mean, a lot of startups would kind of bypass someone with your seniority and the big brands that you worked on. A lot of startups want to hire for other, startup people who've done startup work. And I would argue, this is actually another tip I want to leave. When you are a startup and you're growing something new, having that experience like what you have, Paige, is actually more invaluable. And if you have someone who has so much huge global corporate experience with these huge brands, they're going to bring the systems and the strategic process to the creative vision that you have. So as a startup, I would argue that it's really important to hire someone with more experience.
For that experience to be able to pivot and to be able to adjust accordingly, because you can't just bring the same frameworks and systems that work.
No.
You have to be able to, on the fly, do an executive summary and say, all right, we need to fast track this, or we're going to try this, and if that doesn't work, we're going to try that. Like, when we were sending out emails, there's something, as you know, called A/B testing. Like, let's look at different subject lines.
Yeah.
And again, it is not going to be statistically significant, but let's take, however many names are in your database, let's divide it in half. Let's give half of them this subject line, half of them the other subject line. Let's see which one gets the most click through. And again, not rocket science, but, you just have to put a stake in the ground and keep moving forward. And it's okay to fail. Like, I don't actually even believe in the concept of failure. I believe you either learn something or you're successful. I mean, you learn in success too, but the truth is you learn more when things don't work out, because it forces you to do the post-mortem and say, all right, where did it break down? What went wrong? Yeah. What can we try next? And so don't be scared that, like, oh no, this might not work. Well, that's fine. If it doesn't work, try something else.
I love how you said that. You either learn something or it's successful. I also think being able to separate successes and lessons from your personal self-worth is so important in any job. Your self-worth is not tied into everything that you touch succeeding. Your self-worth is tied into pivoting, being aware, looking at that lesson and being able to change your mind, right? Changing your mind is the most important tool that any successful leader has. You have to be able to take in information and change your mind, much like you did on a daily basis in the startup culture of, we're going to take in this information, and we're going to change our mind. And here were the lessons, and here were the successes, and then we keep moving forward. But your self-worth does not change based on the success of the work that you're doing. And I think many solopreneurs, when you start your own thing, me included, this took a decade of running my business. I'm now in my 12th year and realize, holy shit, my self-worth is not dependent on how successful everything is. I've been doing it wrong. And the business itself doesn't have to be you. It's not you and your personality. And don't take everything personally, right? That's a huge lesson I've been going through.
That is a huge lesson. But so this is a completely long-winded answer to your very astute question early on, which is, how did you start your company? And the answer is in baby steps. I started with big marketing jobs. Then I did internet kind of startup marketing jobs. And only after I had done that for years did I hang out a shingle and open my own firm. So, there are a lot of people, Mark Zuckerberg, Michael Dell, they're in college and they want to start their own business. That was not my path. I learned from the big boys, got really classic, good training. And only after years of doing it for somebody else on their nickel did I do it for my own business. And that's not to say this is the right way to do it, but it was the right way for me. But if I were Mark Zuckerberg or Michael Dell in my dorm room and I had a huge tech idea, they did the right thing for them. I just don't think there's one way to have a great marketing career. I think there are a lot of ways to get there from here.
So how long have you had your own business at this point?
I started it right after 9/11, so it's almost 25 years, believe it or not, which is crazy because all those jobs I was telling you about, the longest jobs I ever had before starting my company, it was 3.5 years. So I've now worked for myself, way more than I ever worked for anyone else.
So with that being said, now that you feel like to me that you've done it all, right? You've done the big brands, you've done the startup brands, and you've done your own brand as an entrepreneur. What would you say has been the hardest place in your career journey to grow in each of those different buckets?
So you grow differently in each one of those buckets. And all of those were really important lessons for different reasons. Mm-hmm. I think, looking at the current bucket as, the business owner, entrepreneur, the toughest learning for me was that, when I started with like a handful of people, and now we've got like 4 people in the group. But the people you start with are not always the ones that are going to grow with you. And that's a tough lesson to learn because, my personal bias is, I want to be loyal to the people that were with me in the early days. But the strengths that you need when you start can change as the business evolves. And yep. I feel like, there were a couple of people early on who, were really good at a few critical things when we started. Mm-hmm. And because they were very comfortable in that zone, they almost turned into like one-trick ponies. Like they could keep doing that really efficiently and effectively, but our business was growing like gangbusters. And I needed them to keep up, like keep pace with, digital marketing and all the new tools and technologies that were out there. And I think as we were growing beyond their comfort zone, it can be scary. And these were people that were kind of central to a lot of the work we were doing early, but becoming more tangential as we grew. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I think feeling anxious and threatened because the business was moving away from what they knew how to do well. And I think I kept them around longer than I probably should have. And,
Because you were a relationship person. I actually really resonated with you saying that the people who helped you start, you almost feel you owe them something.
yeah, and
And it's hard to cleave on something that you feel has run its course.
you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, and I realized I kept them around longer than I should have. And as soon as I was able to shake hands and part ways, like the bar got higher, the culture got stronger. I think the optics really matter, especially in a small business that's founder driven, because, people can look and see what's happening and you can say what you want to say, but they feel what they're going to feel. And I think it was a disservice to the people that I let stay longer than they should have, because they just kind of got more dug in. And, if you want to work with the A team wants to work with the stars. They want the very best people. And if you make excuses or make, exceptions for a few people that are not at that level, it really brings things down a notch. And as soon as they left and I put my money where my mouth was, like everything started growing and people were just very locked in. We were much more in sync and we were growing at a much more kind of happy place. I mean, everybody was killing it and they knew that they didn't have to watch their back because everybody was along for the ride. People were not trying to pull them back to the way things used to be when they were comfortable. Like, I just feel like everything got much more in sync. And it really matters, whether you're a big company or a small company. I think it matters even more with a small company because there's nowhere to hide.
Oh, 100%. How many people are on your team now?
So I've got about 4 dozen people in the group, but not everybody. So everyone's a contractor, 1099. They only get paid when they're working. So
that's the structure of my agency.
Yeah, it's a great way to run a business.
It's a really great way to run a business. Yeah, I've not heard of many other people doing it that way. So that is refreshing. I've loved that as well. I think it incentivizes them, and it also allows my clients a little bit of choice on some of them. Because I like to have a couple of the same positions in my contractor ring. And so that way the client has a little bit of autonomy to say, I really vibe with this person or this design. Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Yeah, me too. So there you have it. That's how we got to where we are. And, it's hard to believe, but we were talking about this before. I hung out my shingle before there was social media, before there was artificial intelligence, before the Great Recession, before. Like, it seems crazy, but, you got to remember when social media started, it was something that like high school and college kids did. It wasn't professional.
No, I was one of the first Facebook seats at Colorado State University. It was either my sophomore or junior year. I was the first Facebook of CSU. And you had to have a university email account to sign up, right? And it was not for work and for job. It was literally for social. And if you remember, it started as a way for boys to be dicks, in my opinion, and rate the women or the girls in their classes or talk about like if they're date worthy or whatever.
Yes.
And I remember the first time I got my account, I joined, there were just, kids in my classes who were all Facebook friending you. And I got a creeped out situation from some dude in like a biochemistry class or something. And my boyfriend at the time got really upset. And he's like, why are you even on Facebook? Because dudes are just using it to hit on you in class. And I'm like, yeah, I don't even know what this is. So then I deleted my early adopter seat. And then it had to go through some growing pains because everybody thought it was stupid. And then after graduation, I think it was like 2006, I then hopped back on and it was kind of evolving a bit more to a friendlier space. But that's my whole journey with social media. And it was not pretty when you started.
Right. No, exactly. So,
To think of what businesses use it for now, isn't that remarkable, Paige? Just to think about Facebook's journey. And you're thinking about 20 years. That's it. It's been 20 years, at maybe 23. And so in that short amount of time, your business has been around longer than Facebook. And so if we look at the startup journey of Mark's and what he had to do with how he invented it as a college boy,
right.
to like the sophistication and the mega trillions of ad spend that like companies are now doing around the world. It's like the place for brands is Meta to do advertising. It is kind of remarkable to think of that founder story for where it started and what it is used for now. So I have a question. Are you yourself currently on social media now? Do you use it for business?
So to be brutally honest, I am well aware of all the platforms. The only one I personally use is LinkedIn. It's a professional platform, great for thought leadership. My clients are not looking for me on Facebook or X or Pinterest or Instagram. That is not, I don't need to post holiday pictures. I don't need to take pictures of my meals. Like, that's not what people are looking.
He isn't trying to become an influencer over here. That era is dead.
You got it. You got it.
Good to know. So how often are you on LinkedIn?
So I probably, get a message or send a message or check out somebody I'm about to talk to or meet with almost every day. But I'm not somebody that's updating my status or posting articles ad nauseum. That is not my MO. I think LinkedIn is a really important component in a digital age because it's more than a Rolodex or a resume. It's the way you build trusted relationships, I think, today. Before you and I ever connected, I went into LinkedIn to see, okay, who do we know in common? How do you clean up online? Like, you want to know that the people you're talking with or meeting with are legit. And especially in this day of artificial intelligence, there's so many AI bots out there. And, you want to know, to have the peace of mind. And you can do back channel kind of intelligence gathering because inevitably you and I are going to know people in common, and I could pick up the phone or drop an email and ask a few people, hey, Ann and I are going to be chatting later this week. How well do you know her? What do you think? And sometimes people come back immediately. They're like, oh my God, you're going to love her. She's awesome. And sometimes it's like, I'll give you a call when I get out of my meeting. And you're like, okay, they're not typing anything. That is a red flag. Like, I definitely want to get that phone call because I want to know what they know. And if this person is not above board, if they're not going to make a good partner or be a bad client for me, I want to know that right away. And so, you've got to do your due diligence, do your homework. Because
I love that you said that. I don't feel like people use LinkedIn in that way as they should, and I think they should. And before I hire anybody, before I work with a group, I 100% go to someone who we know in common or someone in their LinkedIn that you can see, right? There's a mutual.
Yes.
And just a quick LinkedIn message even. Hey, I'm about to work with so-and-so. How well do you know them? Do you know them well enough to say anything, on them as a review? I think that's so important. And I think a lot of people skip that part. Even myself, that was a great reminder. I was thinking,
say,
oh yeah, I don't do that enough. I've done it enough when the price tag or the time commitment meant something. But I think it's for a lot of reasons when you are connecting with someone, especially if you're going to be engaging in conversation and work with them, you need to know if your time is going to be spent well. Absolutely. I always say our time and energy are way more worthy and valuable than money any given day.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to give someone your attention, you got to know.
Money comes and goes. The time is only going one direction. And
you got it.
And if you let people drain your energy, you're not going to be in a position to spend the energy on the things that are going to multiply and expand. So you are 100% right on that.
Is Mavens and Moguls online? Does your brand do social media at all, or
not really,
no?
honestly.
I love that. So are we referral only? Is that kind of how your ecosystem grows?
So mostly I would say it's referral and word of mouth. I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of speaking, and people may read an article or hear me online or on a podcast, and they may say, I heard you talking about XYZ. My company is dealing with that same problem, or our CEO could really use your help. We have a new product launch coming up, and I love the way you did XYZ. I've got case studies on the website. So yeah, people aren't picking up the phone or dropping me an email because I did a Facebook ad or had some Google ads. That's not how people hire me. So I think it's important for you to know, where does your credibility come from? How do people know you? Why do they trust you? What kind of problems can you help them solve? And,
yes.
I just try and put a lot of content out there so that if a potential client has a problem, that like my company can help them get their product or service in the customer's brain so that they think of them first. That's the magic.
I love that. What would you say is your best performing service that you guys offer right now?
So one of the beautiful things about being a virtual company with a very flexible team is we only take on work where I know we can hit it out of the park. And so if we're not a great fit, I'm not going to pick up that business. I think, honestly, the things that we do really well, and we do a lot of market research. We do a lot of PR, thought leadership. We do a lot of online marketing, helping people get the right logo and tagline and find the right words and pictures to tell their story so they can sell more of their products and services faster.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, with this, I actually think this is a happy ending. And I want to say this. Where can everybody who's listened to this episode find you, and maybe spell it out as well, just so that everybody who's listening can go link in with you?
There are two places. My website, mavensandmoguls.com. It's MAVENSANDMOGULS.com. And we have contact us on, you can get me right through the website. And as we discussed, LinkedIn is a great platform. You can see my name is hyphenated, my last name, but on LinkedIn it's all smushed together, Paige Arnof-Fenn, and you can find me that way. And as one of my clients always says, my company has an ampersand between Mavens and Moguls. My last name is hyphenated. She always says, you have too many names, I can never remember. All she remembers is Paige and Mavens. And if you Google Paige and Mavens, I come right up. So thank goodness for search engine optimization.
25 years of mastery right there. I love that. Well, and I actually think the ampersand is very sexy because I have an ampersand between fix and form.
I know, you and I are very simpatico.
And it needed in Mavens and Moguls, and it was fix and form. I love having the "and" in the middle of the name. So
yeah, and the alliteration. I think it's nice. It's memorable. It breaks through.
It does. Wonderful. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you for your time today, Paige. I've loved getting to know you a bit more. I think if people want to hear more from you, definitely reach out because Paige does speaking. And she also loves to do more conversations on other podcasts. So if you want to hear more from Paige, I know I do, publications, content, like she said, she's always putting out content so that you can hear more of her thought leadership on marketing. I, for one, need to hear a lot more from your journey because we just skimmed the surface of all of the accolades along the way and the learning. But I think just from a marketing powerhouse, I have a degree in marketing. I did marketing in my 20s. I personally hate marketing. This is why my company often partners with your company and companies like you because we do all of the branding step one before the marketing, and I've gotten out of marketing. So when I meet marketing geniuses, I'm always so curious and I love to ask questions because I don't really enjoy doing that work anymore. And I love hearing how you approach that work in such a thoughtful and strategically specific way, I think, with the market research.
Well, this has been great, Anne. Thank you again. I've had a great time chatting with you today.
Awesome. Thanks, Paige. We'll see you later.
Bye.
That does it for Only Founders. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you later.